good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this panel on SFDR Level-2. It's here. SFDR is here, in case you hadn't noticed, and in enforcement. Regulatory technical standards, taxonomies, pies, and disclosures are everywhere. But how can an investor use this sudden influx of information to make better decisions? How can we redefine sustainable investments? How has this changed environment, and how can we set up a framework accordingly and use, again, in practical investment decisions? With us here today, we have Fransje Puts from MN and Johan Vanderlugt from Lanschot Kempen. And I'm Tarr. I am lead, Impact Measurement and Management Lead at Phoenix Capital. And I'm your moderator for today. Fransje is client manager and advisor of responsible investment at MN. She has an MSc from University of Amsterdam in finance, banking, and regulation. And her thesis was on the rise of sustainable investing and its effect on financial performance of high-rated ESG companies. Johan is environmental, social, and governance advisor at Lanschot Kempen and participated in our inaugural SFDR panel last year at the summit. We're pleased to have him rejoin us to discuss all the new updates. He's a member of the consultative working group on sustainable finance with ESMA, the European Securities and Markets Authority. So he has deep insights into the logic of SFDR and the bigger picture to share with us. He has an MSc in economics also from University of Amsterdam. So it's well represented here today. So as a first question, I want to address the framing, the language that we use to discuss SFDR, and if it's unnecessarily negative. Is it a reporting burden, or is it an opportunity? Is it an opportunity to showcase what you're doing differently? And would you use an alternative description to burden? Shall I start with you, Fransje?
Yeah, I think it would be really good to use an alternative than burden because, otherwise it really feels as a waste of all the work that we are doing. I have to say, because MN is a asset manager for pension funds, and for us, it also feels, it maybe feels even more as a burden. I don't want to use it, but it feels more as a burden because I think the whole goal of the SFDR is to that it's clearer for the end investor whether a product is sustainable or not. But with our pension system in the Netherlands, you can't really choose which pension fund you have. So it's not that the end investor can really choose, oh, I can choose this pension fund or this pension fund. So then it even feels like that the whole goal of it is not really useful for our sector. But at the same time, I think it's really good that things are getting more transparent and that you can better compare things, better compare products, and also for our selection and monitoring of asset managers, it can be really helpful to have more transparency. And even though I think there's still a lot of unclarity, and that makes it maybe feel as a burden, and there's a lot of time and effort put in to analyze the whole regulation. But when in a couple of years, I think, I think it can be a good thing. How do you think about it?
Yeah, in terms of SFDR, I like this phrase, say what you do and do what you say. I think we as an industry collectively have failed in terms of exactly that. So regulation has stepped in and has basically forced us to be very clear and precise about what we mean when we talk about sustainable investments, when we talk about impact investments. Is that a burden? In my view, not. Is it only an opportunity? Also not. It's a responsibility. It's a responsibility to make sure that we have clear frameworks and clear metrics to describe what we are doing and what we are contributing towards in a concise way and preferably a non-technical way. Is that the SFDR? By no means. It's a beast, it's a complex thing. But let's take the spirit of the thing and let's use it to our own advantage to make sure that we deliver decision-useful information, decision-useful transparency towards end investors. And let's map that to the social and environmental issues that are out there for everyone to see.
All right, so let's move on to this fear question. Fransje, you brought up FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, that I'm hearing a lot now from the ecosystem. And where do you think these come from for honest actors? Should they have FUD? Is it fear of punishment? Or is it around the uncertainty from missing bits like the taxonomies? How should a fund manager proceed?
Yeah, I think there is indeed also a lot of fear, like, that indeed you will be punished when you did not implement it rightly. I think what me gives comfort is that nobody knows exactly how the regulation is set up. There are still coming clarifications of the European Commission. And I believe it's really work in progress, right? It's and I can understand that there is a lot of fear, and also there's a lot of publicity fund managers that are getting punished because they wrongly classified their products. But when the regulation is still not clear, it's also very normal that happens, you know. So I can understand the fear, but at the same time, I think it's really work in progress, and you should just advance and learn by when new clarifications are coming up.
Yeah, I think fear here is a good thing because it forces you to really look into the disclosure that you are providing. Is it clear enough? Is it really what you are doing? Because that's the whole purpose and the whole idea behind the regulation. So there's no single answer here. We're all struggling with the interpretation of SFDR, and we learn more about it as we dig our way into it, including regulators, including supervisors. So that's why within the industry, for example, in the Netherlands, we have DUFAS, which is an association of asset managers where we share best practices about SFDR. We are in the same expert group, so lucky us. So we have to figure this out together. We have to find ways to make sure that we deliver best practices sooner rather than later, because greenwashing is something that no one is happy with. So let's perhaps in some ways tone down our level of ambitions. Let's be crystal clear about what we are doing right now and evolve over time. And let's make sure that we don't lose our clients along the way, being perhaps disappointed in the claims that they thought we were making and that we were not delivering upon.
As just furthering that question, this community of practice you're both in, does it sort of function as a support group for making the more daring declarations, or to encourage each other to be brave in your classification?
Yeah, I think it's a nice way of putting it. It's a group of friends almost. So you share sort of the same frustrations every now and then. And there are certain things that you worry about or that you're not vocal about in your own firm, but you sense that other people have the same struggle. And to put it on the table and to say, like, how are you dealing with this? How are you creating enough resources within your company to make sure that you meet the deadlines? How do you convince people within legal, people within compliance to take more of a business perspective rather than a sort of literal translation, the spirit of the SFDR, because this is going to be with us for a long time, and this is not the only version. There will be future versions. The UK has the SDR, so Europe will also come up with a new set of indicators. So this is in flux, and let's use this to our advantage to make sure that we as an investment community, whether you are on the asset owner side or whether you're on the asset management side, that you make better investment decisions as a result of this, and that you are transparent about which indicators you use to make those goals.
And I think also about the expert group, what is also really nice about it is that I think the whole, one of the purposes of the regulation is also that you can better compare different products, but if you interpret the regulation differently, then you still can't compare it. And if you at least have like a lot of asset managers or asset owners have the same approach, then you can still then it's still comparable. And I think that's also really, really handy.
I see a lot of people waiting for someone else to make the first move. Okay.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? So there is no true single answer. There's a level of discretionary, a discretionary view that you can use. And the question then is, to what extent are you helping the market, helping key actors in the market to compare the same sort of fruit category, apples to apples, and you may not compare the specific apple to the same specific apple, but you're getting closer. So it's good to exchange knowledge also beyond what we're doing within DUFAS, but also as an investment community, to make sure that we give priority to those metrics, to those sustainability indicators that are the most important.
Well, moving on to the subject of pies, or starting to slice into the pie, you might say, principal adverse indicators, to those who don't know immediately. What do you do with all that information that's now forthcoming when you're looking through what's provided by the various fund managers? How do you slice into that? What do you do with that?
Yeah, my data colleagues have a wonderful verb for this, which is mastering. So you master data, and that can mean many different things. I'm not sure whether I have mastered all the adverse indicators, but I'm trying to do my best with the help of many in the network. But I think the most important thing is to not see this as a new set of indicators, but see this as something that to some extent already should be in your toolbox. It should have been in your toolbox prior to the introduction of the SFDR. So how do you make investment decisions on topics that have an impact on the environment, topics that have an impact on social developments? How do you make sure that you monitor your performance in line with your investment objective? That's not a silly idea. What might have been a silly idea from the start is to introduce SFDR prior to the introduction of the CSRD. So the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive, which basically mandates companies to report on those specific pies. Whether those companies are listed or not, both of them have to report. So that's a sort of timing challenge that we have to deal with, but yeah, that's unavoidable, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Shall we tuck into it? Should we interpret Article 9 as greener than Article 8? Fransje?
Ooh. It's funny because I was at a previous session and then my colleague said no. But I'm not sure. I would say yes, because my interpretation is that the main goal of an Article 9 is like sustainability. That's like it comes next to each other with financial returns. Is maybe even more important, and also it has like an Article 9 product needs to have like significant amount or significant percentage of sustainable investments or taxonomy aligned investments, and that's not per se the case for Article 8 products. But it's like the Article 8 is very broad, but I would say like the products that I would cater into Article 9 would be more like real impact, real sustainable investments, and Article 9 can be, Article 8 can already be like products that has like a broader exclusion list than the regulated exclusions. But I think you have a different view on this, so.
Yeah, I think it's a yes and a no. So it's a wonderful idea to create regulation that's supposed to provide a level of transparency, and that's it. But that's not how it works in real life. So people are going to look at, is this fund an Article 9? Is this fund an Article 8 SFDR categorized fund? So I think it's unavoidable that at some stage we will see indeed this topic being part of the European regulation as well, like it is in the UK. So in the UK, in the proposal, the SDR, they are much clearer about the different categories, and they don't make this artificial differentiation between categorizing products and providing transparency on those same products. So to your question, are Article 9 products greener than Article 8 products? Not necessarily, particularly if you take a look at what we're currently seeing in the market on the fund labeling. So we're all in the investment or in the impact investment community. And actually the proposal currently on the table is for impact funds to be also able to be an Article 8 fund, so not only Article 9. Whereas if you want to be a sustainable fund, you can only be Article 9. Or you can be Article 8, let's put it straight, you can be Article 8, but you have to be above the 50% mark, so 50% of sustainable investments, then you can be a sustainable fund. If you have an impact fund, you don't need to meet that 50% sustainable investment hurdle. You need to meet the 80% hurdle of promotion of environmental and social characteristics in a way that contributes to making impact. So that's a lower hurdle. So it's a bit of a technical story, but the hurdle for impact investments in terms of the fund names is lower than for sustainable investments. And I'm not sure whether that's a good development.
Well, speaking about this between 8 and 9, I was talking to a French fund manager the other day who mentioned an 8+. Have you heard this before?
No. Oh,
yeah,
God.
I mean, the official regulation is 8 and 9, but also we internally have 8+. So for Article 8, promotion of environmental and social characteristics, you can do it either without being invested or committed to making sustainable investments, or with the commitment to do it. And if you have the commitment to make sustainable investments, you are a Article 8+. So there's this sort of idea in the setup of the regulation that you grow your portion of sustainable investments over time, starting with perhaps Article 8 without the commitment, and then increasing that commitment over time, and then hopefully moving towards Article 9 in the not so distant future.
Okay, so you're hearing it here first about this article, this 8+, which is now not official, but it's a thing.
Well, I think certainly fund selectors like Morningstar and Lipper, for example, would be looking at to what extent are you just like a plain Article 8 without making sustainable investments, and to what extent are you already making sustainable investments. And this also taps into MiFID II, where from a sustainability preference viewpoint, you have to offer products to your clients with a certain level of sustainable investment. So you have to be sure that you cater to different needs, different shades of sustainability that there are out there. And if you only have Article 8 without sustainable investment, you're not going to make the cut.
All right. So let's move into DNSH. Do no significant harm. That's what I always ask. When does harm become significant? And do all the PIs, the principal adverse indicators, and the do no significant harm sections provide the same sort of negative externality information? And what do you do with all of that information? Do you really sort through it?
Yeah, I think the concept of doing harm, doing significant harm, is not a foreign concept. So the whole investment community has been working with this for many, many years, fortunately. So concepts such as the OECD guidelines for multinational enterprises, the UN Global Compact principles are all very familiar to us. Human rights, business rights, OECD again. So any company or any asset that one is exposed to that is violating these principles to a certain degree is causing harm, and that's not the kind of investment you want your clients to be exposed to. So that's the bare minimum. But above that minimum, the concept of do no significant harm is applied to the European taxonomy objectives. And that's where we are getting into the nitty-gritty of the framework, which means that you have a different DNSH filter for the EU taxonomy-aligned investments than you have for the SFDR investments. So the Article 8 requirement for SFDR investments is to adhere to good governance practices, and that's it. But if you are investing in sustainable investments, then you need to comply with the good governance test for investee companies. You need to comply with doing no significant harm, and there needs to be a substantial contribution to the environmental and/or social objectives. So we are finding out about different ways of what is expected from us in terms of DNSH and using the principal adverse indicators for it. And this is a new tool in our toolbox. And I think a lot of players in the industry didn't get that kind of notion that they were supposed to tackle this for the SFDR through the adverse indicators.
Fransje, I have a question for you. More data. How can investors really use SFDR? I mean, what are you really doing with all of this that's coming in suddenly on your desk and right in front of you? And as an add-on, what do ratings agencies have to do with this? Are you using information for them, and where could they add value?
I think for us, because we already have data is a really big problem, but especially within the illiquid markets. So there is a lot, even more data missing. So I'm really hopeful that with SFDR we will get more data on the illiquid markets. So that's where I'm really hopeful about. And I think you can really better compare different products. Like, for example, the taxonomy regulation, it's not fully into force. Like, we're still waiting for the formal goals for taxonomy alignment, and we're also still waiting for that the companies are reporting on taxonomy alignment. But I think when that is there, then we can really rightly compare different products based on taxonomy alignment. That's only on the ecological part, but yeah, then still, of course, the social part is still missing. And I'm also hopeful that in the future there will also be a social taxonomy, but I think we still need to wait a long time on that. And with rating agencies, what specific rating agency? You mean like ESG rating agencies?
Just in general, that industry. Like, where would you like to find more information, or what would help you out?
Yeah, that the data is there. Like, there are still a lot of missing data also on the principal adverse impact indicators. Like, there are some indicators that there's already a lot of data on, and we can report rightly on, but mostly again on the social topics like gender pay gap and stuff like that. There's still a lot of missing data, and I think it would really help. And I think also that's already what Johan said. Like, there's also coming regulation, the CSRD, that a lot of companies need to report on these indicators. So I think it will solve itself, actually. So I think we just need to be patient, and yeah, I'm interested, because before the 30th of June, asset managers need to report on the principal adverse impact indicators, and I'm really interested, how, if we can really compare them, because also with those indicators, there are a lot of assumptions underneath it. So the regulation is not always really clear how to calculate it. So then I'm also really curious if you can really compare it, and also how publicity will respond on that.
Well, that brings me to the topic then of benchmarks. And since we were talking about social indicators, are there any particular benchmarks that you see as being particularly useful or as developed as on the environmental side? And what do you think should be done about this?
Yeah, we're not really I'm personally not a really big fan of set up benchmarks, because I think you should really align your own ambitions in your products. And for example, you have those Paris-aligned benchmarks, but then it's for example very easy to make your portfolio Paris-aligned when you divest all the polluting companies, but you're not really changing anything, you know. So you would also like to invest in companies that are still polluting, but they are underway to transition. So I'm not a really big favor of already set up benchmarks. You can also, of course, construct your own ESG benchmarks, and then you can put up your own beliefs in those benchmarks.
Yeah, I would say benchmarks on the environmental side makes a lot of sense, particularly on climate. So Paris-aligned and climate transition benchmarks are a good thing, but they don't measure everything. They have a big carbon focus. I think the real opportunity as well is to see greater harmonization in the kind of investment objectives we talk about. So when we say that our investment fund has a social investment objective, what kind of objective do we refer to? How do we map it? What do we invest in? What don't we invest in? So on the one hand, you have the investment objective with the chosen sustainability indicators. And on the other hand, you have your binding elements. And I think that sort of sets the DNA of the product that you have and that your client can expect in terms of investing in assets that actually make a positive contribution to solving part of the social challenges. So it's up to us, and ideally you would like to see some level of harmonization within the industry in terms of what kind of topics we take in the absence of a social taxonomy to describe how we strive to meet these social objectives. So I think one should not hide behind benchmarks. I mean, benchmarks may have brought us many good things, but they have also brought us a narrow-minded focus on looking at what is in the benchmark and then deviating from the benchmark, and job done. I mean, to really tackle the real-world problems, you cannot do that solely by embracing benchmarks. There's a lot more required.
All right. So, kind of going back to the greener question, is SFDR a labeling system, and should it be used as such? Oh, Fransje?
No, I really don't think, or it was never meant to be a labeling system, and unfortunately it became a labeling system. Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of, and I also heard it a bit during the day, like, fund managers that were proudly saying like, oh, we have so many Article 9 products, and I'm not sure, like it was indeed more about transparency, you know, so you have these different articles, and the greener you claim to be, the more transparent you need to be. And it's like you have like a really big bucket of Article 8, and I think that's totally fine, but it doesn't say anything about how green it is, you know, like it's such a great bucket. So it feels a bit weird that a lot of asset managers are now like using it as a marketing tool, like, oh, we have so many Article 8 or Article 9 products, while it is just about, okay, what kind of transparency you need to have on these products.
Well, was this just inevitable because of the amount and intensity of resources required to become Article 9, to fill it out, do the transparency, to prove it, that then would not try to spin it into something marketable? Was there any way to get around that? Johan, how could we steer around this?
Yeah, I like it, what is being said in the UK about the European example. So there they talk about the first mover disadvantage of Europe having to come up with this set of regulations. So I'm agnostic to the fact as to whether SFDR is a labeling regime or not. It's an opportunity to get our disclosure right. and let's not forget that being in Article 9 is not the end game. So how much of an Article 9 investment are you truly? And there's a lot of scrutiny, rightfully so, in the market by independent organizations, including data providers and universities and what have you, to take a close look at what is actually in the investment portfolio of those Article 9 funds. To what extent are those investments truly sustainable investments, or do they cause a certain level of harm? Are there fossil fuel related investments to a big extent in an Article 9 fund, and is that acceptable? With the ESMA consultation and the way it's being written to increase the bar in terms of do no significant harm and setting expectations as to what one should invest in and not, I think we're seeing exactly the purpose of what SFDR was about in the first place, which is to raise the bar for the industry, to set best practice standards and to make sure that we all strive to those standards. And whether that means that you are a firm and green Article 8 with a sustainable investment proportion of 60%, versus an Article 9 with a weak set of investments that in another situation would perhaps not classify as an Article 9. I mean, that's a discussion. And I think as the market will evolve, particularly fund selectors will closely look at this and will look at their own framework of stars and globes and match that with the sustainability disclosure that the funds are providing to distinguish the ones that are calling themselves 9 from the ones that are that perhaps are more of a 9 but are not yet in the 9 category. So watch this space, I would say.
Maybe one thing I would like to add is that because the market is using the articles as a labeling system, the European Commission is also thinking about making stricter rules for the different articles, and therefore it's even more becoming a labeling system. But that's especially for the pension sector, that's a really difficult one, because for pension funds, the whole pension scheme is the product. So you have to classify the whole pension scheme. And if there are stricter rules for the whole pension scheme, that's pretty difficult. We already have it with the good governance test. The whole pension scheme should have comply with the good governance test. And if you have more of those stricter rules, it's really difficult for pension schemes to be classified as Article 8 products.
Well, it's the scary thing about SFDR right now, the strict rules or the lack of clarity around the existing rules. And if they clarify and make it really, easy to understand what's wanted, would stricter rules be such a problem?
I think stricter rules would be good, but I think because, of course, with this regulation, it's really special that it's it's for the whole financial sector, But they didn't think about, okay, maybe it's really different. The implementation is really different for what I said, a pension scheme, than for equities fund, So I think stricter rules are good, but then maybe they should also better think about, okay, maybe we can think about something different for example, pension scheme versus financial product.
Are we talking about naming conventions as stricter rules? What's coming down the line? What's next in line for SFDR?
I would hope simplification and more clarity around the core concepts. So we are trying to solve several things at the same time whilst introducing new vocabulary. That's hard for the market to swallow. So I do believe greatly in a level of discretion. So let the industry determine itself within certain boundaries as to what it deems feasible. But be very clear about the exact requirements, about concepts such as what exactly is a sustainable investment, what is a sustainable investment objective. Right now, we're still waiting for some of the further details. Hopefully we'll get them next month to be able to make that call. And whilst we're trying to find this out, the train has already left the station, and it has passed a couple of stations by which we needed to inform our clients through all the different disclosure requirements. So I think we need more clarity, but we also need to look at ourselves. Like, do we start with compliance first and then tackle everything else, or do we try to look at it from the other way? Like, what are we offering to our clients? How do we map it to what we are good in as a house or as a firm? And how does that translate into what we need to do to be compliant with regulation? Because no real world person is going to wake up and say like, hey, I want to invest my money in an Article 9 fund. Of course not. So they want to contribute with their money to solving certain issues. That's the way, and let's not fall in the trap of reversing that debate.
All right then. So I would suggest we move into the question and answer portion of this panel.
Thank you for your relevant insights. A question I have to both of you is, are you registering your funds as Article 9, or did you decide to stick to Article 8? Curious what if you have a conclusion already. And the other question is, what we are struggling with at Antos, for the ones that don't know, is to get environmental relevant data on the pies from fund managers that are investing in specifically social impact. Just curious if you're recognizing that and if you have found a solution to getting that data from social impact targeting fund managers.
Yeah, so on the asset management side, we have 2 Article 9 funds. We are happy with them being classified as Article 9. One is on the global impact. One is the global impact pool. Another one is the SEG Farmland Fund. So those are really hardcore impact investments that are trying to create solutions for the environmental and social issues. We also have many Article 8 plus funds, so they are invested in sustainable investments and other funds. Then on the data point, the big struggle is that this is a one-size-fits-all kind of framework, right? So both in terms of the audience, so the end investor, there's no distinction made between a professional investor and a retail investor. They will be getting the same information. And also in terms of the investment categories that we are invested in, I mean, there's a world out there that we are all aware of beyond being invested in equities and beyond being invested in corporate credit. And that world is insufficiently targeted by the SFDR, which is resulting in a data disadvantage, because the data requirement is centered around corporates through the CSRD. So it's much easier for a sustainable investment fund that is invested in companies to meet the regulatory reporting requirements than for a fund that is invested in alternatives, for example. Because then you would have to undertake a very weird, if I may say, journey of looking at things through the lens of the investee company that is managing those assets, those real assets. And for them, it doesn't often make sense to be reporting on gender pay gap and all these wonderful ratios that were designed at the tables of people in Brussels and Paris.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said a lot on the second question, so I wouldn't go deeper into that. I agree fully with it. And then on the first, we haven't classified any products as Article 9, only as Article 8, and that's mainly because the impact funds that our clients have are externally managed, and those are more the products that would be classified at Article 9, but we only manage Article 8 in-house.
Yes, I have a question also on the Article 9s. The French authority sent a strong message on excluding some sectors de facto from every Article 9. Do you have any views on this, or should some sectors of the economy or some companies involved in some particular activities, despite all those that are banned, should be excluded from Article 9? And if yes, is there a threshold for this?
I think it's a great development of the AMF to be raising its voice here. I think it's also illustrative that it happens in this way, which basically illustrates, in my view, the point that they felt that their voice was insufficiently heard before. This goes to the very core of the matter. Should we distinguish between taxonomy aligned and taxonomy or non-taxonomy transitioning? Is there room for both areas to be classified as a sustainable investment? Because there's a big gap, right, between doing no significant harm and substantial contribution. So I think as the SFDR matures, it will be inevitable to raise that question and perhaps to cater for room to both be invested in transitioning and aligned investments for sustainable investments in the Article 9 context. Because let's face it, with the current development that we are seeing in the investment community, Article 9 investments become a very small subset of everything that is out there for two reasons. One, the great regulatory scrutiny, and for the second reason, the fact that we don't have all the data to be making those claims. And we need capital to flow into the right direction, and regulation is making this visible for the end investor. So it would be a shame if we were to devise regulation for which Article 9 would be a very elitish segment, not within reach for average investors.
I saw more questions in the back there before. No? All right, well, if that's it for questions, I want to thank Fransje and Johan for joining us today with all this talk about 8+, which is a new one for me, and indicators still to come, and naming conventions, and the missing taxonomies, and benchmarks for social indicators. We're talking about the maturing and the natural evolution in this process, and that we'll still be waiting for a while, but as Johan was talking about the spirit of SFDR, and this is not the first time I've heard the spirit mentioned, that we have to keep that in mind, what the spirit of it's supposed to be. There's more to come, and I'm actually looking forward to it and continuing this discussion next year.
Yeah. See you next year.
Thank you.